Today is a special holiday tonight, not today, but tonight and tomorrow, really. More tomorrow. The 14th day, not little Passover, but the second Passover. So we're going to talk about the second Passover called Pesach Sheni. The second Pesach, tomorrow, the 14th day of the month of Iyar. But in order to understand the second Pesach, we have to have a background of the first Pesach. And that is on the first Pesach, on the 14th day of the month. So before Pesach actually begins, before there is a prohibition to eat any chametz, before there is a commandment to eat matzah and maror, before that, we have a mitzvah, what we call the Korban Pesach, to bring the Paschal lamb. That is the 14th day of the month in the afternoon, Bein Arbaim in the afternoon. And we read this last Shabbos. See source number 1, Leviticus chapter 23. Eile Moed Hashem, these are the appointed holidays. Next verse, B'chodesh Rishon, on the first month, in the first month, B'arbaasar Chodesh Ben Arbaim, the 14th day in the afternoon. Pesach LaHashem is Passover for God. Uvachamisha Asar Yom LaChodesh Chag HaMatzos, and the 15th day of the month is the holiday of Matzos. Says Rashi, what does it mean? It's a Passover for God. Hakrovas Korban Sheshmoi Pesach. It's the day, the time, the appointed time to offer a sacrifice called Passover. So the name of the sacrifice is called the Passover sacrifice. Korban Pesach. When is the mitzvah to bring it?
In the afternoon.
Of which day?
On the 14th.
14th day of the month in the afternoon. Understood? Perfect. When was this instruction given? When the Torah was given. Now, history. The Jewish people left Egypt on the 15th day of the month of Nisan. 49 days later, 50 days later, God gave us the Torah at Mount Sinai. 40 days later, we made the golden calf. Moses came down the mountain and smashed the tablets. Moses spent 40 days praying, forgiveness. He goes back up the mountain. Second set of tablets comes down 40 days later on the day of Yom Kippur. Forgiveness.
4 months. 4 months.
5 months. From you have Tammuz of Elul Tishrei. 4 months. Sorry, 4 months. Exactly 4 months. And Moses comes down the mountain and tells the Jewish people that God instructed us to build a sanctuary, a tabernacle. So we get right into it, and it takes us 6 months to put the whole thing together, approximately. At the end of Adar, the month of Adar, the 12th month, is when it's done. 7 days, Moshe Rabbeinu works to take it up, they put it down, they do a pre-run, and then on the first day of the month of Nisan, now is the official Chanukah Samizbeach, the inauguration of the tabernacle. And every tribe, one day, for the next 12 days, every tribe would bring a special gift, inaugural gift in the temple. Good. Now, a few days later is Passover. This would be the first anniversary of Passover. First year, big deal, right? The Jews are instructed to bring a Korban Pesach, to bring a Paschal lamb. When do we bring the Paschal lamb? The 14th day of the month in the afternoon. We're instructed to bring the offering, to eat it that night. In Judaism, every day begins the night before. So the 15th day really begins the eve of the 15th. And at night, we're going to eat the meat of this Passover sacrifice together with matzah and maror. That's the instruction given. Now, when the Jewish people are instructed that on the 14th day in the afternoon, we are once again to bring a Passover offering, they're given additional laws. One of the laws that they are given is that you can only bring a Passover offering if you are ritually pure. If you are ritually impure, you cannot bring the Passover offering. And this is where we run into a problem. The problem is, as we read in source number 2, there were men who were ritually unclean because of contact with a corpse. And therefore, they could not offer this Passover sacrifice that day. So what did they do? This is from the book of Numbers, Parshat Vayisro, chapter 9. So these people approached Moses and they said, we are impure due to contact with a corpse. Why should we be excluded from bringing the offering to God on this holiday like all other Jews? Good complaint, right? We're ritually impure, so why should we be excluded? What does Moses respond? He says, what? Wait, and I will hear what God commands you. In other words, what did Moshe Rabbeinu say? You guys have a legitimate complaint. This we have to take with the big boss. So what does Hashem say? Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe, God speaks to Moses saying, speak to the children of Israel, tell them that any person who becomes ritually impure via contact with a corpse, or is far away, whether among you or in future generations, shall make a Passover sacrifice for God in the second month. On the 14th day in the afternoon, they shall offer it. They shall eat it with matzah and bitter herbs. They shall not leave any leftovers by the morning, and they shall not break any of its bones. They shall offer it in accordance with all the laws of the Passover sacrifice. In other words, God answers the Jewish people's complaint by saying, new holiday for you guys. This holiday is going to be called Pesach Sheni, the second Passover. Second Passover is given to the Jewish people. Why? Because we came with a legitimate complaint, a legitimate argument, and they said, we are ritually impure. Why should we be excluded? We also want to participate with everybody else. When is the second Passover? Exactly 30 days after the first Passover, the 14th day of the month of Iyar, the second month on the Jewish calendar. Now, the second Passover is a little bit more simple than the first Passover, because the first Passover, we have laws and restrictions about eating chametz and owning chametz, etc. The second Passover, we don't have any such restrictions. You can have the matzah and chametz in your house together. It's a totally different holiday, totally different vibe. But what it is a makeup date for anyone who missed out the first time round 30 days earlier. Anyone who is ineligible now becomes eligible. Anyone who missed it can now make up for it. So this is the general theme of the second Passover, which is, as I mentioned on Shabbos already. What's the theme of the second Passover? It's never too late. There's no such thing as a missed opportunity. You missed it the first time, you'll make up for it now. You'll make up for it. God will give you another opportunity where you will be able to make up for anything which you've missed in the past. And as we see that this holiday today, you can imagine, what is the observance of the holiday? I mean, it's only to make up for the fact if you missed the first time bringing the sacrifice. Well, if you don't have a temple, so you still can't bring the sacrifice, then there isn't really anything to do, right? It's not like the first Passover, we have a mitzvah to eat matzah, we have a mitzvah to stay away from chametz. So there really isn't a ritual that's connected with. There's a custom to eat matzah on this day. So tomorrow to eat some matzah, shmura matzah. And we don't say tachnun. We don't say the supplications in the prayer. We don't confess our sins because it's a festive day. Second Passover is a festive day. But it has lost some of its power, or it's lost some of its observance, at least in the practical sense of bringing the sacrifice nowadays. That being said, definitely the energy of the day tomorrow is this type of an energy of Loma Nigorav, an energy of, this is Nitokin Farfalin. There's no such thing as being lost forever. Doesn't exist. You can always make up for it. Second Passover, God tells us we can make up for it. That's the general theme of the holiday. But now we're going to get into something more particular that is actually fascinating in terms of how we can improve in our relationship with God. And we begin with as follows. Why were these people impure? Who were these people that were impure in the desert, that they came to Moses? So give a look in the Talmud tractate Sukkah, page 25a, and the Talmud offers three opinions as to who these people were. Opinion number one, as you can see in your source sheet, is that these people were those that carried the coffin of Jacob. What does that mean? So approximately 150 plus years prior to this story, we had a fascinating Jewish leader in Egypt. His name was Joseph. He was the reason why we came down to Egypt, because he invited Jacob and the whole family to join him in Egypt, and he was in charge of Egypt, so everything was great. And when he died, he knew that the Egyptians would not let them take his body to Israel to bury it there. He knew that they would insist on burying it in Egypt because they would feel like they would want to, would be some type of pilgrimage. This was the great Joseph, who all the Egyptians respected and honored. After all, he saved them from the famine. So Joseph tells his family, he tells the Jewish people before he dies, and this is the end of the book of, the final verses at the end of the book of Genesis. He says, God is going to redeem you from here. We're going to eventually get out of here. And I have one request from you, and that request is, make sure you take my remains with you when you go. Do not leave me here in Egypt. That was the request that he made. They said, yes, we will promise you that when we leave, we'll take you with us. And the Jews knew that when the day is going to come, we have to take Joseph's remains with us back to Israel. And that's exactly what they did. We're not going to get into the story now, but the coffin of Joseph traveled with them. They were Jews that had to carry it. They were involved with it. So these Jews were ritually impure because they're dealing with the corpse. So therefore, they come out to Moses with the complaint, we're ritually impure. We would like to participate. Why are we being excluded? That's opinion number one in the Talmud. Opinion number two in the Talmud is nothing to do with Joseph. This has to do with the nephews of Moses, the sons of Aaron. Aaron had two older sons, Nadav and Avihu. They brought an uncalled for sacrifice into the Holy of Holies, and they expired on the spot. So they dropped dead in the Holy of Holies. Well, you got to get them out. So two relatives had to go there and get them out. They would become ritually impure. And this happened just before Passover, during the inauguration of the Mishkan. So they were still ritually impure by the 14th day of the month. And therefore they had a problem. How are we going to bring the Passover sacrifice? Why should we be excluded? That's the second opinion, that it was the nephews, that it was Mishal and Eltzaphan who took out Nadav and Avihu from the Holy of Holies when they expired there. And the third opinion is, perhaps we can say, the most straightforward opinion and simplest understanding, and that is, they were people that became ritually impure because they had to bury somebody. Death is part of life. It's going to happen. So people are going to be involved with the burial society. So they are the ones that came and said, listen, we're impure, ritually impure, because we're burying people that are dying in the desert as part of nature. And therefore, why should we be excluded? So these are the three opinions in the Talmud. Go with either one. It doesn't make a difference to the theme of what we're going to be talking about today. Let's read page number 5, where it says, how was Pesach Sheni created? Do you have that? Okay, Shalom, you can read.
How was Pesach Sheni created? When the Jewish people left Egypt and celebrated Pesach in the desert, the rule was that the Pesach sacrifice and the full program of the Seder would only be observed by people who were ritually pure. During this first Pesach in the desert, a group of people came to Moses and said that they were ritually impure after having come into contact with a corpse. Not having enough time to complete the requisite purification process in time for Pesach, they asked Moses why they should lose out on the opportunity to bring the sacrifice as God wanted the Jewish people to bring at the designated time. Moses replied by promising to ask God what to do. And God responded that from now on, that is impure, anyone that is impure and unable to bring the Pesach sacrifice on time can do so at a different time after Pesach on the 14th of the year. This state became Pesach Sheni. Since then, we celebrate Pesach Sheni every year on the 14th of the year. Even in the current era, when the temple no longer stands, we can't bring any sacrifices. We still mark this day by the omission of the Tafnun supplications in the daily prayers, and by observing the day as a festive and joyful occasion. This is the story in brief.
All right, so that's the story in a nutshell. You got it? Everyone clear now in the second? This is the tomorrow. We celebrate tomorrow. We understand now why. Tomorrow's energy is different. Celebrated by the Jewish people. Perfect. Now, let's get to unpack a fascinating idea that we're going to be able to extract from this holiday. And this is, we'll continue reading. Brandon, you take it away.
Strangely worded complaint. What is the lesson we can learn from this? The way the petitioning Jews formulated their argument.
Can you hear? 1 second. Can you hear on Zoom? I'll put the.
Yeah.
Huh? Come a little closer, Brandon.
What is the lesson? Bring the Pesach sacrifice, and then ask that a solution be found for them, despite their
1
being.
second. We were on mute for a second, so go back. I couldn't hear online. So start from the beginning. I apologize. Okay, we're making you work hard today. Go ahead.
What is the lesson we can learn from this? The way the petitioning Jews formulated their argument appears to be out of logical order. They began by stating that they were ritually impure, and then continued to ask to be allowed to bring the Pesach sacrifice. It would seem more logical to reverse the order. First, they should have stated the fact that there's an obligation to bring the Pesach sacrifice, and then ask that a solution be found for them, despite their being ritually impure. There's deep meaning here.
So I said, let's break down the question. You understand? When you have to do something, but you can't, for somebody you have a problem, you can't get it done. So how would you explain to someone what's going on?
What the problem is?
First, you tell them what the problem is, then you tell them what has to get done. First, them has to get done, then you tell them what the problem is. When you think, practically speaking, when you speak in life, right? You have a special, you have a court date, right? So you go to someone and you tell them, you know, it's terrible. My car broke down and I can't go to court today. So what are they looking to tell you? Why do you have to go to court? Oh, I have to go to court because I have a summons that I have to go. No, you tell them, today I had a court date that I have to be because I have a summons, but I have a problem. The problem is that the car broke down. You can't go. Any issue in life, whenever you're telling someone that there's a problem here, you have to first lay out what's going on and then explain what your issue is. So the Jewish people should have come and said like this: we are obligated to bring a sacrifice, right? The sacrifice can only be brought if you're pure. We have a problem that we're impure, so therefore we can't bring the sacrifice. Now help us out. You don't come along and say, we're impure, and you commanded us to bring a sacrifice. It doesn't work that way. That's not the way people speak. So why would the people come? The first thing they would say is that we're impure, and you commanded us to bring. It seems to be a little bit backwards. That's the question over. Just a simple question. But the phraseology seems to be off. So there's deep meaning over here. What's the deep meaning? Continue.
Pesach sacrifice is different from all other sacrifices. There are 3 types of sacrifices. A, individual sacrifices brought to fulfill a personal obligation or as a donation. B, communal sacrifices brought on behalf of the entire people. These sacrifices are offered in the temple by representatives of the people as a whole. C, the Pesach sacrifice is unique in that every individual Jew is commanded to bring it at the same time and place, together with all of the Jewish people. Meaning, the Pesach sacrifice combines 2 qualities. On the one hand, it is an individual sacrifice offered by each person individually. At the same time, it is also a communal sacrifice that the entire Jewish people offer at the same time.
So we have like this. So we have.
Down.
Sorry. So we have three types of sacrifices. Well, actually 2 types of sacrifices, and one is the Pesach, which is a hybrid of the 2. What are they? They're as follows. The first is what we call a korban yachid, a sacrifice that's brought by an individual. And this is brought by each individual according to their needs. There is no fixed time. There's no set time when you bring the sacrifice. Everything depends on you, the one who's bringing it. This is you, the one who's offering it. You're the one that it revolves around. Then we have communal sacrifices. Communal sacrifices most certainly do have a fixed time, but these are not brought by individuals. This is brought by representatives of the individual. Representatives of the community. When do we bring such a sacrifice? Every Shabbos. There's a Shabbos sacrifice. There's this Musaf sacrifice. There are daily sacrifices brought in the morning and the afternoon in the temple. Every holiday is special sacrifices we read about in the liturgy. That's what we're talking about, the sacrifice they brought in the temple, special for this particular day. So it's not dependent on any person. This is a communal sacrifice. And all of a sudden, we're introduced to a new type of sacrifice called the Pesach sacrifice. The Pesach sacrifice, we say, every individual has to bring a korban. Every individual has to bring a sacrifice. You don't have to bring your own. You can partner, group together, but every single male has to have a portion in a Passover sacrifice. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, there's a fixed, and therefore, let's back up. And therefore, that would be considered a personal sacrifice. That's an individual sacrifice. If I have to bring it, if it's me who has to participate, that's individual. It should be based off of me. But then we say, on the other hand, it has to be brought at a particular time. It has to be brought on this date, which has all of the trimmings of a communal sacrifice. And not only that, it has to be brought everyone together. The Jewish people would cram into the temple in 3 groups. They would cover all the Jewish people. How it worked was miraculous. They fit into the courtyard of the temple, and all the Jews together in Erev Pesach, and they would just divide into 3 different groups. That's massive amounts of people being stuffed like sardines into a small, relatively speaking, area. So we have the Pesach, which is a hybrid of these 2 things. On the one hand, it feels very personal because I have to do it. No one can do it for me. I have to participate. I have to have a portion in it. On the other hand, it has a fixed set time, which means that it seemingly should be just something that a representative of the Jewish people should bring. And being that this was such a unique sacrifice, such a unique opportunity, such a unique moment, we can understand why it was meaningful for anyone to participate in this. This wasn't your ordinary mitzvah. It wasn't the ordinary sacrifice. As a matter of fact, in theory, if someone was impure, let's just think for a moment, someone's impure, and you had to bring a sacrifice, but you were ritually impure, personal sacrifice, so what happens? So you wait. Why can you wait? No big deal. Because anyways, it doesn't have a fixed date. It's anyways determined based on your availability. So when you're available, you go do it. But this one is not determined on my availability. Yet you're telling me I have to do it. But I can't do it. And now we have a problem. This is a unique sacrifice, unlike any other type of offering that we're bringing to the temple. And now we have a flaw. We have an issue over here. Right? This is where these people that were impure, this is what they're coming along and saying. This was the gist of their argument. But it went a step further. It wasn't just this particular situation that they were challenging, but they were challenging of how they got into this predicament to begin. How did we get here? Who put us here? Which system put us in the position that we're in right now? God's system. God's system seems flawed, they said. How do you make sense of the system that God made? God said that everyone has to bring a Passover offering on this particular date. The same God said that if you're ritually impure, you can't bring it. Well, so you don't want me to bring it, the sacrifice on this day. God's system was stacked against us. God's system seems to be flawed, they said.
Yeah, it's just system. You're ritually impure, you can't do it. It's like,
so it's built into the system.
yes, because you have to be ritually pure to do it. So that's a law. It's like,
Yes, but if you're ritually impure, you can't do it.
until you're ritually pure.
No, because when you're ritually pure, you can't do it. That's their point.
Because it's too late.
Yeah, because the day passed, I can't do it. That's their whole point. This doesn't make sense. If you tell me you can make up for it tomorrow or next week or whatever it is, so then for sure, you're right. But if I can't make up for it, there's no makeup date for it.
Said life is fair.
Who said life is fair? That's their question. How could it be that God created a system that's unfair? Let's read. Continue, Brendan.
Flawed system. This is what the petitioners meant when they said to Moses, "We are ritually impure as a result of contact with the corpse." God designed the world such that among a nation of millions of people, it is certain that people will die from time to time, upon reaching the age of 120, or however much God has granted them. The Jewish people are a large nation, blessed by God that they should be so numerous that they are uncountable. Every day new Jewish children are born, and it is impossible for there not to be any deaths in the days leading up to Pesach. Therefore, the petitioners argue that there must be people who are obligated to bring the Pesach sacrifice, yet they are impure. This means God set up a system with an inherent contradiction. On the 14th of Nisan, every Jew is obligated to personally bring a Pesach sacrifice, and this requires a state of ritual purity. Yet, at the same time, God designed the world such that every 14th of Nisan, there must be at least a few Jews who are obligated by Torah law to handle a corpse and thereby become ritually impure.
So the petitioners made a unique, they made a unique case over here. They didn't come asking for something they believed that they deserved. That's not what they did over here. They didn't complain about a particular injustice. No. They said the whole system. This is emblematic of the whole system over here. God created a system where he said, on the one hand, if you're ritually impure, you can't do it. And on the other hand, he said, everyone has to do it. It's not for me. So this year it's me. But it's inevitable that next year is going to be someone else. There's always death. God's system is people are going to die. And if people die and you say you have to be buried, no dead person ever buried themselves. So of course, someone who's alive has to go and bury the dead. Now, if I bury the dead anytime before Passover, I'm going to be ritually impure for 7 days. So you're going to have always a respectable amount of Jews that are impure. And the same God said, you have to bring it. Told me that I can't bring it. then don't say everyone. So this was their big complaint to Moses. Continue, Gary.
I think they're fetching a lot.
No, it's not. This is not a coach. See this one. Continue.
All right. They argued we are ritually impure as a result of contact with the corpse, a natural part of life in the world God set up. They therefore asked why they should lose out. What did they do wrong to deserve not being able to bring the Pesach sacrifice as God commanded? God accepted the validity of their argument. He said that indeed they couldn't be barred from observing the Pesach sacrifice. As a result of their complaint, the Jewish people earned the new mitzvah and festival, Pesach Shem.
So now we can understand why they first mentioned their status of being impure. Because this was part of their argument. Their argument was that people being impure is part of God's system. We're normal people, they said. We're part of the ecosystem of life. We have to be involved with burying the dead. So how can it be that God gave a mitzvah to bring a sacrifice expecting everyone to be pure? The way they phrased the question was so indicative of what they were trying to drive at. This is a natural phenomenon. We're impure due to dead people. That's right. You heard it here. And that's life. Moses, that's life. Now, what do you want us to bring a sacrifice? How does this work? How do we make sense? Now we can understand. So Gary said, if you take this story and you look at it, they're kvetching a lot, right? And we have to sometimes, the Jews do know how to kvetch. And we have to sometimes, very well. And in our Torah, in our history, we have plenty of that. How do you know what's a kvetch and what's legit? How do you know if there's a really legitimate claim or not? So a number of things. First of all is, you have to say, what would you answer such a person? Do you have a good answer for them? To tell someone that you're kvetching, because you don't have an answer, doesn't mean that they're kvetching. This means you don't have the answer.
It means all of life is unfair. There are some people who have more gifts than others. There's some people who have more opportunity than others. I mean, it's just the nature.
That cannot be.
Why?
Because, no, I'll explain to you. It cannot be that a God would say everyone has to do something and make in the system of the everyone that not everyone can do. Don't say everyone then. Just say people that are pure. No problem. We can understand. That's not what God said. God said every male has to bring a sacrifice. You have a mitzvah to bring a sacrifice.
So isn't there gonna be some, excuse me, aren't there gonna be some people who have buried people for Pesach Sheni? And again, they're gonna be impure?
Yeah, the first Pesach will do it. You know, in 30 days, you can figure it out.
But what in between the 30 days, people might die. They're gonna have to be buried. There we go again.
No, because you already brought it one. You're only impure for 7 days.
Okay.
Within 30 days, I think 7 days exist.
Okay, let's say, chas
You have
v'shalom, Gary, I understand what he's saying. Let's say, God forbid, it shouldn't happen to anybody that we know or anybody, period. Let's say a son loses his father. And then his mother dies. So he was.
He's saying someone, yes, you're right. No, correct, Shalom. In other words, Shalom is explaining, what do you do in a situation when someone happened to be ritually impure by both? Correct. That's where you say, it comes to, you can only
Yes, exactly. You only,
Right.
no, you can only make up, no, it's not a loophole. You can only say there's a certain amount of makeup. It's just, at a certain point, it comes, let's prepare for next year already. You know, we're getting too close. Friday, you can't be thinking about last Shabbos, you ready? Because you're talking about tonight and Shabbos already.
Right.
So you have to, yes, that is an element. But Hashem responds to them in a positive way. And God responds and says they're correct. And God responds and says we're going to give them a second Pesach. In other words, up until this point, there was no such thing ever in the history of making up for something. It didn't exist. The concept, we now live with an idea you can make up for, because we opened up by saying today is tomorrow's second Pesach. But if we wouldn't have that idea anywhere, we'd be thinking slightly different. The fact that God responds and says that we're going to give these Jews a second Pesach is the greatest expression to us of the fact that God accepted what these people said. Now, why would God accept what they said? Why wouldn't God say these people are just complaining? Because the way they ask, the way you can tell the difference between someone who's kvetching, someone who is serious, is in their tone of voice and the language that they use. When someone speaks in a respectful way, when someone speaks in a heartfelt way, in a sincere way, so the listener hears it. It comes through, it comes across. When someone says it in a complaining way, in a kvetching way, in a disrespectful way, so the listener understands it also. And you can hear in the words that they use, in the tone of voice, and their choice of words that they have. So these people, by the fact that they question God's system in this way, telling Moses that the system seems to be flawed, God heard in their voice that the way they express themselves, that they really would like an opportunity to do this. They want to know, why are they not being afforded an opportunity to participate with everybody else and bring the Korban Pesach? Why can't we do it? Moses, we would like to do it too. Anytime someone comes along and says, I would like in on a good opportunity, I want to participate, I want a partner in something good, you have to take them in. You have to say yes. Recently, I was with somebody and he tells me, Rabbi, I want to give you a donation for the Chabad. So I said, I don't want your donation right now. So when I ask you for a donation, then I hope you'll say yes. But right now I don't. No, that's not what I want from you. So he turned to me and he said, Rabbi, you gonna tell me you're not gonna take my charity? You can tell a Jew that he doesn't have a right to give charity? You're gonna close that door on me? I thought about it. I said, you're right. You're right. Who am I to tell you that you can't give charity? If you want to do a mitzvah, I have a right to tell you, no, I'm sorry, but who am I? Said, I apologize. You're right. And I took the donation from him because he was 100% right. What? He meant it sincerely. Wait, I want to do a mitzvah right now. I want to do the mitzvah of charity right now. What are you telling me I can't do it? What type of business? No, you can't do that right now. These Jews came along and said, we want to bring the korban. We want to participate. What does it mean? We're impure. You said we have to bring it. What do you mean? What are you shutting the door on me, God? You told me I should do this. What are you telling me no? God heard, said they're sincere, and therefore God afforded them an opportunity to become ritually pure. And then wait a few weeks, and we're able to bring 30 days later, on the 14th day of the month, the next carbon. Now, what is the lesson that we can learn from this? This is all the story of the second Passover. So let's continue now the lesson that the Rebbe taught 1965 from all of this. It has such profound meaning in every single Jew's daily life, because there is a constant struggle that exists within the Jew. But before I mention the struggle that exists within the Jew, let's take it a little bit, let's zoom out for a moment. And let's take the struggle of a father. A father who has to work to earn a living, right? So on the one hand, I want to be dedicated to my work. I want to earn a lot of money. I want to get a raise. I want to get a promotion. I want to invest myself and everything I have into my work. On the other hand, I have a family. I want to be with my wife. I want to be with my children. I want to spend time with them. So I'm pulled on the one hand from my job, and the other hand, I'm pulled from my family. How do I balance that? How do I work that out? Every minute I'm spending with my family is a minute spent less at work. Every minute more at work is a minute spent less with my family, and I'm torn. The more you are invested in both family and work, the more torn you are. So if you don't care about your job, you don't care about that, fine, you could choose one over the other. But if you don't have the luxury because you love both, and you care about both, and you need both, so now what do? There's this tremendous struggle that exists. And the same thing can be, especially for a mother in the workforce, you have the same struggle. Mothers weren't so common to be in the workforce, but in today's day and age, mothers want to be there with their children. They want, especially the younger they are, on the other hand, they have a career. They want to pursue their career. When do I start a family? Can I start a family? These are questions that people are asking themselves every day. And that's the struggle. On the one hand, you want a family, on the other hand, you have your career. And they're pulling in opposite directions. So what happens to me? How do we figure this out? That's a general struggle in life. But then you have a Jew, and a Jew has this following struggle, and that is, on the one hand, I want to be dedicated to God. I want to be an observant Jew. I want to follow the way a Jew is supposed to be and how a Jew is supposed to live. On the other hand, I live in a world. My reality is that the world that I live in is not a godly ghetto. It's not exactly the way. On the contrary, it's the total opposite environment. So I'm pulled on the one hand, I have to be here. I have to be here. There's no way I can run away and isolate myself from life. So I have to go out to work. I have to go on the subway. I have to go deal with other people, and have all the struggles and challenges that world presents. And on the other hand, I want to be just, I wish I could just study Torah. I wish I can just pray. I wish I can just bask in God's glory. And this, in truth, goes all the way back. The struggle for the Jew goes back to the spies in the desert, where we read about it in about a month from now, where we read how the Jewish leaders at the time in the desert, they really didn't want to go into Israel. They preferred to stay in the desert. Why? Because why not? Tell me, what better life do you have than living in the desert?
They study Torah all the time.
If God gives you food, and God gives you shelter, and God gives you clothes, and God gives you water, what do you need? You have all the time, you have all the necessities that you need to be dedicated fully to God. Comes along Moses and says, God said we're going into Israel. Israel, what do you do in Israel? You got to plow. You got to sow. You got to harvest. Note, this was before the Industrial Revolution, and even with that, the business world is tough. Imagine you got to deal with your hands, and you got to get workers, and you got to pay wages, and you got to deal with the mishigas and problems and crop and wholesale and retail customers
And fight.
And who wants this?
Yeah.
Who's interested in this?
Yeah.
They said, no, thank you. We'd rather be in the desert. But God said, you got to go into the land of Israel. So we end up staying 40 years while that generation dies before we can move on into Israel. But because we know that at the end of the day, we don't have the luxury. God doesn't give us the luxury of remaining in the desert, in the four walls. You can only do that to a certain point. At a young age, yes, a child shouldn't have to go out to work. A child should be given everything they need until they're mature enough and wise enough to be able to go out into the world. But the plan should be to go out into the world and to impact the world, to bring God into the world. But the only way you can bring God into the world is if you yourself go out into the world. You can bring God with you into the world. But that itself is a challenge. That's a struggle because it's uncomfortable for me. I would, in theory, every Jew should feel much more comfortable in the four walls of the synagogue than they feel in the four walls of their job. That's not my natural environment. My natural environment is here. Out there, I dread going there every single day. But that's my struggle. On the one, I have to. I'm being pulled there because I have to. And the other hand, I also want to be able to enjoy, to nourish my own self and my spiritual side. And this is a very important back and forth that we go through.
That's why we come to class.
Huh? That's why it's important to come to Torah class. That's right, 1000%. And this is a big deal when it comes to Shabbos. So classic example, let's say I own a shoe repair, I own a cleaners, I own whatever this, a restaurant. So I'm in business to make money. That's why I'm in business, in order for me to make money. You come along and you tell me on Shabbos I have to close my store. Now what do? That means at least 1/7 of my business is dead. At least 1/7 less than my competitors, and maybe even more because it's on the weekend when more customers are walking on the streets. So that means you're telling me on the one hand I have to earn a living, I have to make it back. On the other hand, you tell me I have to close on Shabbos. How do we make sense of this? At a certain point, a Jew comes along and says like this: I wish I can do more, but I just can't. Life isn't giving me what I need to do more. But I, as the rabbi, of course, I get it all the time. I don't have time for this, right? You want to put on tefillin? I don't have time. You keep Shabbos? I can't. And I have to go to work. My boss is everything is you can't. There's always an I can't. I can't. Which behind I can't means, in theory, if your boss said it's okay, would you do it? You got to stop and think about it. Am I just using my I can't as an excuse? Or is it for real? I can't close on Shabbos is for real? Or not?
Baruch Hashem, I work for a Shom Shabbos
Yeah, exactly.
place.
So that's the question. But let's assume for a moment every Jew is righteous. So behind that I can't, there also is the following. It's a claim against God by this individual. And the claim against God is, God, how can it be that you were commanding me to observe Shabbos, and you also commanded me that I have to earn a living, and I should go out into the world, and I should be observant Jew? How can I make this work? I simply don't have the money for it. I can't afford it. How can it be that you put me in a position where I'm not going to be able to afford life? I wish that I would be able to. I'm begging you, allow me to be able to. One of the biggest discussions that people have, that married couples have, I should say, is how many children should we have? What's the question? What's behind that question? How many should you have? Many. I'm not going to say this a general across the board, but in many situations, it's financial. How many could we afford? I would love to have more children, but we can't afford it. Why can't we afford it? You know what the cost of living is in New York City, right? And if I want to send my child to a yeshiva on top of that, to a day school, you know, the tuition. So besides the regular cost of living and expensive of my own life and my spouse's life and my child's life, on top of that, for a religious Jew, you have to have also private school, and you have to have this and that. It's impossible. How many could we afford? So we make a calculation. You take your calculator, and you make your calculation that we can afford this amount of children, then that's it, right? And you think to yourself, and we all do this to ourselves all the time, we therefore put ourselves in a box, and we say, this is what we can afford to do. This is how much we can afford in life. And I say that not only financially when I say afford, but I mean afford as an individual. How much patience do I have for you? You know, I have X amount of time, I'll listen to you, but after that, I can't afford it. It's for my own mental health that I can't listen to you, we tell ourselves. I have no time anymore to volunteer for whatever it is because I have plenty of, but in my mind, I put a certain limit. I put myself in a certain box and I say, this is what I have, this is what I can do. Past, beyond that, I cannot do. So sometimes it's just mishigas. Sometimes it's foolish because we're lazy, etc. But we're not talking about that now. I'm talking about when it's real. Like I really can't afford to have another child because another child is a huge expense. And I don't have the income for that. It's real. It's 100% real. No one's going to tell me that numbers don't lie. So I turn to God and I say, God, this system is flawed. Because on the one hand, you want me to have more children. And on the other hand, I don't have the money for it. I can't afford it. So how do I make sense of this? This was the claim that the Jews made, that the system is flawed. So the message of the second Pesach is, God comes along and says, if you mean it sincerely, I will give you another opportunity that you don't know about. Another blessing will open up in your life. Another door will open. Somehow, everyone in their own way. God is God. God figures it out for me. But he's going to enable me to do it. You ask most people that have large families and they send their children to yeshivas, thank God, and you ask them, how did you do it? They married off all of their children. They've married off everybody now. And you look back and say, you're not a multimillionaire. You don't have any great big company. And how did you do it? And you know what to tell you? I have no idea. I have no idea how God enabled me to do this. They had no idea. When they went into it, they didn't have a calculation that said, I could or I can't afford it. And when they were in it, they just knew that this is what we have to do. And God provided them with the blessings that they needed every time. Speak to them, they'll tell it to you. Whenever they really needed it, there was an opportunity available for them that they were able to grab, let me pay my tuition for this year. Let me make a bar mitzvah for my kid this year. Help me I don't know how I did it. We don't know how. It's called the second Pesach energy. Second Pesach is, we have no idea how we're doing it. God says, I'm going to give you an opportunity. I'm going to give you a makeup day. I'm going to open up a new holiday. It's a new holiday. You guys never heard about it. It's called the second Pesach. What? Yeah. Second Pesach. In my life, God says, you don't know how you're going to do it? I'm going to give you a new holiday, a new day in your life. And you're like, wow, God, thank you so much for this blessing. I had no idea how we were going to get through it before now, but now, with this, we can do it. This is the lesson that the Rebbe taught us in 965, that we can learn from the Jews in the desert and how they framed it. Their question was sincere. They really wanted growth. They wanted growth. They were looking for growth. They were looking for connection. They wanted to do the right thing. But life, seemingly their predicament in life, didn't allow for them to do it. They pushed back. They turned to God and they said, God, I'm sorry. How does this work? We want to do it. And God said, when you mean it, when you really mean it, I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to open a channel that you didn't know about, that didn't exist for you up until this point. So a Jew should never say to themselves, I can't do a mitzvah. I can't do what the right thing for me is in this situation. Whatever. I'm in a situation right now. What's the appropriate thing for me as a Jew to do right now? The answer can never be one of calculation, saying that because of this, this, and this, therefore I cannot participate. Therefore, no, sorry, we don't accept that. We don't accept that. The answer has to be, I am going to participate. How? I have no idea. I have no idea how it's going to work, but it's going to work. We're going to make sure it works. In 1957, The Rebbe did something that was extremely unusual for him. He did a fundraiser at a Farbrengen for Kfar Chabad. In Kfar Chabad, there was a terrorist attack in Kfar Chabad. They murdered some students in the yeshiva, and they were devastated. The village, small village, Kfar Chabad at that time, very small village, and the Arab terrorists killed it. This was devastating for everybody. And the Rebbe sent 10 messengers there to uplift the spirits and everything, but they needed some funds also. And at one point, the Rebbe raised funds for the village in New York. He would raise funds to send to Israel to help rebuild the village. So the Rebbe said at the Farbrengen then that he's going to do something that's out of character. He's going to make an appeal, and everyone's going to take a paper and write down their name and the amount of money that they're going to pledge to give. And he said, God's going to bless you. Everyone should give as much as they possibly could. Whatever you think you can give as much as you possibly could, because God is going to bless you tenfold. You'll receive the money back from God. Tremendous blessings the Rebbe gave. But then the Rebbe said like this: I'm going to read the papers and see how much you give. And if you gave a number, an amount that I think is too little, I'm going to call you out on it and ask you to give more. That was totally out of character.
What about being embarrassed?
Being embarrassed. So everyone took the paper and they wrote down what they thought the maximum amount that they can give.
So
So
this was 1957.
1957, yeah, 1957. So the Jew, his name was David Deitch. His name was David Deitch. And he wrote down an amount of money on a piece of paper, like everybody else, and he sent it up. And the Rebbe read the paper, and the Rebbe said, David Deitch, you have to give 10 times more than that. 10 times more. This was already what he thought was his max. You can imagine. He thought this was the max he could afford to give charity. And he was sincere about it. He wasn't playing a game. The Rebbe was his Rebbe. He wasn't saying $18 when he really could afford 18,000. He said the amount that he knew that he'll be able to pay it, and that's it. He won't have a penny extra. And the Rebbe told him 10 times more. But he was a chassid. So he said, okay, 10 times more. That's what you say, 10 times more, 10 times more. The next morning, he went and he took a loan to pay the pledge. He didn't have the money. How is he going to? He had no idea. But if the Rebbe said 10 times, he take a loan and he paid up the pledge. He gave the Rebbe all the money that the Rebbe asked for. The Rebbe sent it off to the village in Kfar Chabad to rebuild the village over there. And a short while later, he saw an article in the paper that there was a textile factory in Boston that had a fire, and the owner was, because due to the fire, was getting rid of all the material. It was closing down, so he was selling the material for dirt cheap. And basically, what do they call it? Quick sale. What do they call it?
Fire sale?
Fire sale. Literally a fire sale.
Yeah.
That's what it's called, a fire sale.
Yeah.
So he took his truck. He took a truck and he went there. He was in the material business. He went there and he saw the material or whatever. He was paying pennies on the dollar. He threw in as much as he could afford, as much as he can fit into the truck. The owner comes and says, "You got to take more. You got to take more. You got to get rid of this stuff. You have to take more." And he stopping him there wasn't an inch of space left in the trunk. He stopped him with the material and he paid bupkis, as we would say, for it. And he gets to the warehouse, his own warehouse, and he's unloading his truck and he's taking out all the materials. And he's going through materials and he realizes that these materials are very expensive, high-end materials. And they were the fires, so they're burnt. But he unwound a few layers of the rolls and he sees how only the outer couple of layers were affected. All of the main material, there's still huge quantities of material that's in perfect condition. And all these rolls that he just bought were very expensive materials, and he was able to sell it to get rid of the damaged part of it, but there was significant good stuff, and he was able to sell it for a very, very large profit, and he became a very wealthy man. David Deitch became a very, very wealthy man because of this story of the fire sale. What did he attribute to? He attributed to the fact that the Rebbe promised everyone can get repaid by God for the donations that they made, and the Rebbe made him give 10 times the amount, but he thought it's impossible. He knew it was impossible. It's not like he would, if you were to ask him and say, how are you going to do it? Why would he tell you? He had no way of knowing. He had no way of saying, oh, I'm going to get a raise. No raise, no nothing. This is how much I earn every year. He knows this is how much I earn a year. I have a good year, I'll have a few more dollars. 10 times more charity to give doesn't add up, never adds up. But he said yes. He believed, he knew this was what had to be done. And God responded, and God said, you did your part. I'm going to show you a new way of blessing that you didn't know about before. And God opened up a new road for him that he was able to travel on. Still today, his family still does quite well from this business that he started back then in the late 50s. Big family today that their wealth comes from this business. So this is the message, a takeaway from the second Pesach this year. So tonight, tomorrow, this is the energy that we have, a special energy in the world, to be able to counter our own best calculation of life and to push ourselves in the right way. If it's in the right direction and we're pushing ourselves towards God, then we'll see how it will work out. We won't know how it's going to work out. That we can't. We won't be able to predict how it's going to work out. That we won't. But we could predict the end result. The end result is going to be that it's going to work out. If we're blessed, it may work out with riches and expansiveness. That may be. Not everyone is blessed with that, given that riches on the back end of it. Some people just make out what they make ends meet. It works out for them, even though they went beyond what we thought up until now was the little confinement, our own box that we thought is real. We perceived for ourselves, this is how much I could afford in life to give output. I only have X amount of output. I only have X amount of space in me for somebody else to be there. Make a little bit more space. Make a little bit more space, and you see wonders will happen. You see wonders will happen in all areas of life. All right. Anyone have any questions?